Welcome back to the next edition of Get Real with Alabama Wedding Vendors. I'm here this morning with David Shirk and Unplugged Photography. I'm going to ask you to explain that in a second, but as you know, if brides, if you've been listening to our podcast, this is another great photographer in the Central Alabama market. David, welcome out to our podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem, man. I've got your painting on the wall behind me here, the canvas, and it's a beautiful black and white shot there. Let's start there. Tell me about that particular shot.
So one of our things that we love to do with brides is during the reception, if there's a little bit of downtime and we can get out somewhere at nighttime and take an awesome picture, we're going to sneak away for a little bit because once you get 4 hours into your reception, things have kind of calmed down, everybody's dancing, you're a little bit calmer than you are right after the wedding, and so you can take a couple good pictures. So we went out in the woods and found these awesome street lights, and it was so dark. And I'm holding the camera as still as I could and praying that I would get a picture in focus. And it just turned out spectacular.
I mean, that's a beautiful piece of work there. And I was looking at the other pictures on your website, and I've seen the on-the-ground shots where you're lying on the ground. And I like to work with a photographer that's willing to get a little dirty to shoot. So.
Oh man, I'm always dirty. I guess that'd be a good way to say it. I literally bring an extra pair of clothes to every wedding just in case after that one time I fell in the mud. One of my favorite pictures I took this past year, it was a 97-degree day up in Nashville. And so I had the wedding party in the shade. And I had this ugly sidewalk that I did not want to be in my picture. So I laid down in the middle of the road and kind of got grass to block out the sidewalk. And that asphalt, I felt like an egg cooking,
But it was hot.
But the whole rest of the afternoon, the groomsmen, I was a hero for doing anything for a picture, So, but that was another one of those days where I just planned on getting dirty and changed before the wedding actually got started.
Well, that's awesome that you're willing to do what it takes to get that shot.
Mm-hmm.
If you take hundreds of images during a wedding with the digital photography realm now, it allows you to get more shots. You may take 10 or 15, but to parallel that to something else like a football game, 3 or 4 plays can make a football game.
Exactly.
Just like that, 3 or 4 photos from the hundreds you make are the ones that just go, wow.
Exactly. I try not to ever give up on finding the best picture, and sometimes literally the best picture all day is the very last picture I'll take at a wedding. It's after everything's died down, even after guests have left and it seems like the whole event's over. I want to be there till the very end and not miss the perfect moment. One of the things I like to do is, it's a term that I heard from a National Geographic photographer, but it's called sketch with a camera. And it's kind of like an artist would, take a pencil and make a little sketch of what they want to paint before they produce the final painting. I go in and I'll have concepts of what I want to do with pictures, but I want to keep on shooting and keep on trying different angles and trying different things until I know I've got the perfect shot. And sometimes I don't know on the spot, and that's why I take so many pictures, because I want to make sure when I get back home and put them on the computer that I've nailed it.
There's no second chance.
Exactly. There's no second chance. So I take, I take about 3,000 pictures for every wedding. Sometimes, if it's a long day, sometimes it'll be 4, 5, 6,000. And we blow through hard drives, obviously. But I don't want to miss anything. And these are the bride and groom. It's their memories, and it's one of the biggest days of their life.
Tell me about where Unplugged came from. I know you have a little bit of a music background.
I grew up playing guitar, and I was a wannabe musician. And now looking back, I think it's a total blessing that I have a terrible voice and cannot play better than I can, because I have an even better job now. But so it's always been something I loved. And so when we're coming up with a name for the business, Unplugged kind of fit, because we wanted to capture a little bit of the acoustic kind of improv style that I think I'd incorporate some into my photography as well.
I see that in your pictures. It's a unique return of the photos. You don't see one photo and it looks like the next and it looks like the next. Each one of your photos has a style unique to you. And the music, I play guitar like you, not as good as you of course, but the whole thing about the music, it's an art, and you dig into the depths of an art like you have photography, and you give a bride just an absolute blessing of photos. Now, I know you don't give her all 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 images to look at the event, once you get, if a bride's listening right now, what can she expect to see for her proofs? How many images do you narrow that down to and kind of get it to her?
You can expect to be sitting in front of the computer for about half an hour. Just get ready, get your box of Kleenex and all that sort of thing for the first time you look at your pictures. But my philosophy is, I don't go in with a set number, but I want to show them as many pictures as are good. So I do take a lot of redundant ones, and I'll pick the best out of those. But just depending on the time of the day and how many varieties of locations we have and that sort of thing, usually it's somewhere between 800 and 1,200 pictures, which is totally overwhelming when they're trying to pick them out for the album. So we go through and a lot of times we help them, we'll put together a pre-design for the album and send it to the bride and groom and let them approve what the pictures they want for their final album.
When it comes to, your style and any photographer that a bride is looking at for their wedding day, pictures that you yield after that is based on your experiences in life. And I know that you and your wife and your family have traveled to some exotic locations around the world. Where all have you been around the world, and what have you brought back from that?
Well, goodness, I've traveled a lot of places. I actually did a good bit of traveling before we were married. I was real fortunate with that. I've been all through Europe, Italy, Greece, Turkey, France, England, a few trips to Latin America. So the way I got into photography was through travel pictures. The first pictures I ever took were kind of on trips through trips I took in college. I remember I won $25 in the travel photography contest in college, and I thought that was the greatest thing in the world, which basically covered the cost of the print and the frame that I put the picture in. But I was so proud of that. But anyway, my wife is a doctor, and when she was in med school, she applied for a fellowship that sent us to Asia. And so we lived in Taiwan for a year. And the crazy thing about the whole journey is we knew nothing about Asia going in. And that was the point of the fellowship, is to expose Americans to Asian culture. So we had gotten our first digital camera right before we went in. And we had tons of free time and got to travel a lot. And that's when I got into taking pictures. And I made so many friends, literally across the world, learning about photography and sharing pictures with other people and looking back. And so when we came back from that year, people had seen pictures that we kept a blog while we were overseas, and people had seen pictures on there and started asking me to take pictures for them. So it started out with babies and kids, and then, of course, if you can take pictures, somebody's going to ask you to do a wedding. The first one I did was up on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and a really beautiful girl who's a good friend of mine with no money. We did it almost for free, and it was spectacular. And were it not for Megan, I don't know that I would be a photographer today. But so that's kind of how I got my start, and things snowballed. It's weird. I never sat down and said I'm going to be a photographer when I grow up. I still haven't. I like to think I haven't grown up, even though I turn 30 next week. It's kind of the backwards way of planning a business, but people asked me to do it, and so I did it.
But along with that, you also have the talent.
Exactly.
Because anybody cannot just be a wedding photographer, and
exactly.
that's the whole thing about being what some people might deem as the word professional. And even though you're just turning 30, you've got hundreds or thousands of images of weddings that you've done. You've got all these experiences from the weddings that a bride can come to you and say, hey, looking at your pictures, I like your style, I like what you do, what can you do for me?
Exactly.
So that's where the bride's listening to this. So bride, if you're listening to this, David is an awesome photographer here in the Birmingham, Central Alabama, worldwide actually. He'll go anywhere if the money is there. But the whole thing about being a good wedding photographer is the experience that David has, the eye, and that's a very important thing, is the eye that he has. And David, if they go to your website, which is?
It's davidshirkphotography.com.
Okay, now spell Shirk.
So it's www.davidshirk photography.com, or you can just Google Unplugged Photography, and I will